By the way, we are now live with Harrowings. It's just David and me so far, but we'll see if somebody else joins in, and this will be posted out on YouTube. It'll go out on Spotify. It'll go out on automatically, and clips of it will be generated. So Harrowings is just scraping the surface of things with my different guests, and I'm really lucky to have a very generous soul on board today, David Gans, who's the host of the Grateful Dead Hour, among many other things. Grateful Dead Hour has been going on since 1987, right, David?
Well, it actually started, K-Fog started the Deadhead Hour in November of 1984. Joined the team in February of 1985. I came in to promote my first book, playing in the band. And the guy who was hosting the show was seriously oversubscribed. He was the morning drive DJ, and he had his own specialty show and stuff. So a couple other deadheads and I started feeding him material, but the station manager figured out that I was sort of becoming an expert on that since I had just published a book. Plus, I had a great tape collection. Plus, the Grateful Dead let me into their vault for tape. So eventually, they asked me to take responsibility for the show. It went national in 1987,
I
but I have been producing Grateful Dead related radio for more than 40 years now, entirely by accident. I did not intend to become a radio person.
Accidents happen. The reason that we're connected like this, I think, is well, partly I was part of your green room crew for the live streams during the pandemic. And if it wasn't for the pandemic, I probably wouldn't have seen that. And I don't think you would have been doing live streams so much, right?
Well, I started doing the daily live stream in April of 2020 because all of my gigs for that month dried up. You know, when the shutdown started in March, I had a very, very busy April 2020 plan. I had two festivals and a tour, and one by one, all of those gigs dried up. And so I just was sitting there thinking, what am I going to do? I got to keep playing music or I'll forget who I am, you know? So and I looked around, there were big things like Fish would do a national live stream and Bobby Weir was doing live stuff from TRI and stuff. But I sort of decided that if I waited till nobody else was playing, I would never find a slot. So I just said, I'm going to play every day at 4 o'clock and see what happens because it'll keep me playing. And it turned out to be just a fabulous thing. A couple of my people that were already fans just sort of got into it and started promoting it, especially this woman named Jill Swellville, who's been one of my biggest fans for years. She kind of appointed herself the den mother of the thing and really started spreading the news. And it picked up a regular audience of people that were stuck at home because of the pandemic. And I also needed to supplement my income because all that money that I wasn't making on the road and at my merch table and stuff. So I got off my lazy ass and started an online store, and I've been selling books and music through that store ever since. But yeah, it turned out it was basically a way to keep myself engaged during the pandemic, and it wound up being like a spiritually, musically, positive experience in every way. It's been the best thing for my music ever. My singing and playing have never been stronger because I played every day for 5 years, you know.
Oh, yeah. And Sunny has just pinged me that she can join us. So I'm going to try to get her on here as well because I think that'll be kind of interesting, and she might have some questions for you as well. But David, I did want to mention that your website is perfectible.net, correct? And that's you want to spell it out for him?
Perfectible. It came from the recording sessions from my first album. My friend Eric Rollins and I hired a producer and some real musicians and made a record in 1997. And after every take, when you're recording a record, you do a take and you play the song through, and then you go, okay, is that good enough that we can work on it and fix it, and replace a few things and do the overdubs on it? And our criterion after each take was, is it perfectible? Can it be perfected? So at the end of the session, I said, well, let's name our label Perfectible Recordings. And so that's what we decided to do. And that became the name of our label. And it's still the name of my label. And when it came time to start an online store, I thought, well, that's a unique name. It well, I think a little bit more interesting than calling it the David Gans online store or whatever. So I created the domain perfectible.net, and that's the name of the online store. But because of who we are and what society we live in, I also claimed the online name perfectible with ABLE at the end in case people spelled it wrong. So that'll take you to my site too.
Yeah, and, you know, I've noticed, yeah, we had the tip jar out there too, so that was a really easy way to contribute, and from my perspective as a fan, it was just great to be able to move the needle a little bit for people I really cared about, and also connect in a very immediate way, because, of
Yeah.
course, we'd be chatting back and forth, all the different fans would be chatting while your live stream was going on, and it really formed a little community,
Yeah, very
green
much so.
room crew, right?
And it still exists. I still play every day, and there's a couple dozen people that show up every day for that and hang out with each other. I don't interact with the chat during the show, of course, because it'd be kind of silly for me to squint at a screen while I'm between songs or whatever. So I just play, but I collect requests before the show. There's one guy that basically sends me 3 requests every morning, and I make a menu. I started another result of all of this is I had a guy create a database for me, so I put all my set lists in after every show, so I can keep track of what I've played. And I have this thing, and I arrange things in order of most recently played. I take off the last 4 or 5 days worth of songs, and then I make a menu for each day
Mhm.
of songs that I might want to play. I don't make a set list.
Right.
That is not compatible with an improvised life. Thank you very much. But a menu of possibles for the day is what I do. And I place my correspondence requests at the top of that menu. And some days lately I've had a lot of requests at the same time. And so I very often these days have like 7 or 8 requests, which is almost an hour's worth of music. So sometimes it winds up being an all request show. And I consider that an important challenge too. So I don't just play the songs I want to play every day. I don't want to get in the habit of just playing the same few songs over and over, especially since I have a live audience every day. So I try to mix it up, and every once in a while something new comes into my head. Last year, I was washing the dishes and I remembered a song started playing on my brain radio, an old song I'd remembered from when I was a kid called I Remember You. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
looked it up on YouTube,
Yeah.
and people of a certain age remember it. It turns out it's a hit record from 1961 by a dude named Frank Ifield. But the thing was, that hell, I remembered the song almost perfectly when I looked it up on YouTube and I listened through it. It was all in my brain for
Isn't that
60
amazing?
years for no reason whatsoever. I hadn't thought of the song in years, but all of a sudden it popped into my brain. And now I play it once a month or so just because somebody will request it. It's just my brain is full of songs.
The
So I'm
presence
going
of
to go back.
music. Yeah, and
Well,
it's the way it gets into our brains too, I think it just involves so many different aspects, and when you're a player, I don't know if you ever caught the, interview with Reed Mathis that Holly Adams did out on KSKQ. You were on there once, and
yeah,
one
I
of the
know
reasons
Holly,
was
but I,
that. But what happened with Reed was he was talking about how listening to music engages the same circuitry that playing it does, which
yeah.
really kinda made me feel good as a listener, as a more that's
Yeah,
that engaged.
there's definitely something about music that just kind of transcends.
Mhm.
And I it clearly I had an aptitude for it because everything I've ever done in my life basically emanated from a moment in the spring of 1969 when my older brother taught me a couple of chords on the guitar and set one of my poems to music. That has been my entire life since then. But what's interesting to me is that I remember all the songs that I learned in my head before I became a musician. And it's very interesting to go back to songs that you never played before, but that are lodged in your mind permanently, you know?
Mhm.
Like all those Beatles songs I grew up on, I wasn't playing music then, but they're still in my head and I could play most of them from memory. It's kind of an amazing thing.
Well, that's the thing. It amazes me too that I have all the lyrics of Talking World War III Blues in my head. You know that one by Bob Dylan,
Yeah,
right?
sure. Sure.
Anyhow, we wanted to get talking about your course that's starting this evening. You're so generous to give your time while you should be probably prepping the course, but it's called Dead Reckoning. Is that right? It's
Yeah,
this iteration?
each quarter they give it a different name because the class is fairly popular and there's a bunch of people that have taken all of the sessions and this is the
Yes.
fourth of them. So the name of the class this time is Dead Reckoning: The Grateful Dead in History, Art, and Commerce, and I have 5 authors lined up to join me for this one. And here's the
Right.
thing, it's not a carefully constructed curriculum, and it is not a lecture series, and it is not a history. I figured when they asked me to do the class, I figured the history is really, really easy. You can there's at least a dozen comprehensive histories of the Grateful Dead that are all worth reading. So I didn't think it was worth it was a great idea to just recap all that stuff that's already available, since what I bring to this thing is the knowledge and experience of being a musician and playing this music. I have friends that are musicologists who can tell you what keys the songs are in and what modes they worked in and relate it to Western music and all that stuff. That's way above my pay grade. But I have the experience of playing the music and of having spoken with those musicians for 50 years. So and I've played with some of them. I played a few gigs with Phil Lesh in the late 1990s,
Right.
and I played with Bob Weir once or twice, and played with Vince Welnick quite a bit after he left the Dead. So what I bring to this is the experiential thing of knowing how this music works from having played it, and that's the perspective that I bring that the students want. And what's fascinating to me is there are a lot of younger students and a lot of women are taking the class. And I think people who are fans of this music want to understand how it works. And so that's what I've been able to bring to this thing for these previous editions of the class. And this time I brought a bunch of experts in who have written books about the Dead from different perspectives. I'm starting tonight with Rosie McGee, who was, of course, a member of the Grateful Dead tribe in the early days, photographed them off and on for 20 years, and has been a good friend to me for 40 years. So I've been trying to get her since the class started, and I finally persuaded her to do it. And she will bring the experience of having been a member of that tribe and talking about what it was like, when they were traveling to gigs in station wagons and stuff. So she's gonna talk about the music. And hello there.
Hello.
Yeah, we suddenly managed to drop in again. We've been having a little trouble getting her on board. But Rosie McGee, you were talking about, didn't want to
Yeah.
interrupt.
Well,
Go for it.
I'm bringing authors, and Brian Anderson, who has a book. This is really interesting. He had a book that made the New York Times bestseller list this year with a book, sort of a technical history of the Grateful Dead. It's called Loud and Clear. It's
Yes,
a history of the Wall of Sound project. So
yes, I haven't bought
I
it yet.
I brought him in. David Brown, who's a Rolling Stone editor and published a wonderful book called So Many Roads, a history of the Grateful Dead. And Barry Barnes published a book called Everything I Know About Business I Learned from the Grateful Dead. And he was teaching business at the college level using the Grateful Dead as a model of compassionate and responsible corporate behavior. And I also have Dennis McNally, of course, was the
Okay.
authorized historian of the Grateful Dead. So each of these classes is going to feature an author, but it's not going to be like again, it's not the history. We're not going to be and I'm not requiring anybody to read the books of these authors, because when they come in it's more like an honors seminar. Dennis is going to talk about his experiences as the band's publicist as much as the content of his history book, right? And Brian is going to talk about the Grateful Dead's sound project and stuff, but in the context of being fans of the music, and there will be music breaks during the classes and stuff. So it's not a rigid, organized lecture series. It's basically knowledgeable people bullshitting about the Grateful Dead and taking questions from the class and stuff. So it's very, and I have to confess, I have no pedagogical training whatsoever. I dropped out of San Jose State in my sophomore year. But I've spent 50 years on this exact topic with these people. So it's literally the only thing I'm qualified to teach. And this is the only way I'm qualified to teach it. Because if I had to write lectures and stuff, I don't think I would be very good at that. I probably would be if I got up to it. But this is just an improvisational and conversational presentation, which is perfect because that's what Grateful Dead music is: improvisational and conversational.
Yes, and, the thing that really is turned me on about your interviews, with these guys was you'd really done your homework, I think is the way that Phil Lesh phrased it when you first interviewed him, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
wanna talk a little bit about that one?
Well, I that was it was amazing to me. First of all, I started all of this. I became a musician, really. I played the clarinet in school, but I became a musician in the spring of '69 when I started writing songs. And basically, my entire life has been organized around that ever since. I became a deadhead in 1972 when my songwriting partner finally persuaded me to go see them. And that
Alright.
opened my life up, my musical life up in every direction. And just, the Grateful Dead were such an eclectic and exploratory group, and their way of making music was so different and so attractive to a certain kind of person that
Yes.
I just jumped right into that. And then I became a journalist in 1976. There was a music magazine here in the Bay Area called BAM, and I started writing. I did a few things for an underground paper when I was in college, basically looking for free records and concert tickets. And so that's why I became a journalist. And I started meeting people and interviewing people. And I interviewed Les Paul, and I interviewed Leo Fender, and I interviewed Ted Templeman, the producer of Van Halen and the Doobie Brothers. I got a $1 zillion college education by being a journalist and getting to meet people and talk to them and go to recording studios and stuff. When I joined the staff of BAM, they were already doing a regular feature on the Grateful Dead, and they gave me responsibility for that feature. So I started going over to the Dead office and hanging out with Eileen Law, getting the itineraries for tours. And I started meeting people. I met Jerry just hanging out in the office one day there and stuff. So I started doing formal interviews. My first one, I think, was with Mickey when he was in the hospital after his car accident in
Alright.
'77. Then I interviewed Bobby. Ed Pearlstein and I went to LA and interviewed Bobby while he was working on his second solo album. Then I interviewed Hunter in the fall of '77. So and I began to have like relationships with these people. I'd run into Hunter, more often, and he gave me other interviews at later times. Getting Phil in '81 was a real breakthrough because he wasn't doing a lot of press. He didn't talk to a lot of people. But the publicity people at the time, a lovely fellow, the late Zon Artman, and his partner, Julie Milburn, talked Phil into doing an interview with me for Musician Magazine.
Right.
And that was the one where I showed up ready to talk with him. I wanted to get his story, but he recognized, as you said, he sort of interrupted himself in the middle of an answer and said, "Hey, you really have done your homework here." And Phil recognized that I knew what I was talking about as a musician, not just as a fan, right? So I connected with him, and he sort of, in a way, kind of became my sponsor in that world because I think he recognized that I could explain this music in a way that was a little better than most of the journalists were able to. Again, because I was not a musicologist, I wasn't really an academic, but I wasn't just a fan either. I was a guy with some critical appreciation of what they were doing. So the band, for the most part, recognized me as somebody that could do them some good. And so I started, you know, having more to do with that world and eventually started getting opportunities to do things like produce box sets and things like that.
Yeah, I thought you mentioned briefly that you'd played with Phil as well, and that was with Broken Angels, is that correct?
Yeah, in 1997,
Well, I read about that. I know about that because I know you're instrumental in getting him to come and begin playing again, and I'm grateful for that. So
Yeah.
I know that that's a very strong connection there, and so many people thank you for that.
Well,
And let me introduce Sunny briefly because she did have a little trouble getting on with us, and I did invite her to be a co-host, David, and thank you for allowing that because I didn't want to be impolite and just throw an extra person in there. We're like you and Gary with your guests is the way I look at it when you're doing the dead air breaks. Sunny Triple is my vocal coach and also vocalist with a lot of bands. Sonny, you want to do a little intro on who you are too, so that we can continue the conversation with the context?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I'm a deadhead, and
Hello.
but I sing in all different bands. I'm in a Talking Heads tribute band called Psycho Killers. I have an original
wonderful.
Walking in the Air, and
Don't
and
forget Covered in Jam.
yeah, Good Jam is a band I had for a long, long time. But I've done a lot of different Grateful Dead tribute projects and performed with I don't know,
Well,
you know,
TC, right? Uh, in fact, I was at a program with the Live Dead and Brothers, Scott Guberman, who you played with a lot, David.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you had Guberman and Gans, shooting the shit with Guberman and Gans there on
That was
Live.
another pandemic project. That was Scott's idea. It was really fun to do.
It was fun, and I enjoyed doing it. It was different. Rosemary Anati's stream stock was an interesting thing. I don't know where that's at now. I got to tag up with her later. But Sunny and I was at the show with Live Dead and Brothers when I engaged her to be my vocal coach right after my father died. And you, David, had played Box of Rain for my father on request for one of his birthdays. I think his 88th birthday. He made it to
Cool.
91.
Good.
And I managed to get him to listen in on that live, that as a, and it's just such a generous thing that people are doing is sharing their music, sharing the love of family and friends. Sonny and I last connected, and I sent you a picture of her, I think, and David, in one of my texts over to say, hey, is it okay if I add her in? When she was on stage, just off stage for a minute at a fundraiser we were doing Saturday night at the Hamilton Live down by the White House here in D.C. for Ron Holloway, the saxophone player. I don't know
Right.
if,
I heard
Ron.
about that. Yeah, I played with Ron once. I joined. He and I both sat in with On the Bus one night in D.C. a few years back.
So I was in that band for many, many years. Probably right after you did that, I joined that band, and someone told me that actually that you recommended me for Terrapin was looking for a singer, and someone said, "Oh, David Gans," and I said, "I don't know that I've met him, but I'll I don't know." And I subbed for them for several things, but the thing we did for Ron the other night, we're gonna do another one December 5th at the 8 by 10. They're announcing it today I think they announced it at 11. I didn't, but I'm gonna do.
Tickets went on sale, actually, and I got my ticket.
Oh,
Good.
good. I'm gonna do it with I'm gonna do Dark Side of the Moon, and there's going to be a Dead tribute band called Great Northern that starts the evening. Then Ed Huff and Friends, which Ed Huff is really great. He was in The Bridge, and he has he's co-writer with Chris Jacobs, and he has a bunch of great people. And my band is going to be comprised of some of my guys from here, and Tim Palmieri from Lotus, and John Brady from my Psycho Killers band, Neil Singh from my
Walking in the
original
air.
the air, and my drummer Jason Skeen on drums. And we'll have Pat Rainey on saxophone. But we're gonna all the money raised is gonna go to Ron Holloway, who I
Good.
visited. And he's got Wernicke's, and he broke his leg in October of last year, and didn't get enough nutrients when he got back. I guess he was experiencing some hardship at home, and no one realized it. And when you are lacking in nutrients, you can develop Wernicke's, which mimics some dementia. And so he's doing well, but he's in a long-term care space, and he needs care, like round clock care. So and that's expensive stuff. So we're all, Ron's played with everybody, and I've played with Ron so much over the years.
Yeah.
And so we're all trying to do what we can.
I actually caught
Right.
Ron with Dark Side of the Mule the last time I think I saw him on stage.
Well, And
somewhat. But David,
Wolf Trap, and so I've done it with him many times, so I thought it would be a nice nod to do Dark Side of the Moon, you know?
David, you talked a little bit about some of the financial side of things with the Grateful Dead. I think that's coming up in this one, and I think that's going to be really interesting. I think the fact is that in the musical community, there's a possibility because we do have this connection with each other that we do have the ability to raise significant amounts of funds. The last time I saw Ron's GoFundMe, I think it was well over $120,000 has been raised for his support. So that's a lovely thing.
Great to hear. Well, this is
Now,
a community, a global community, and we figured that out years ago. And
yeah,
John Perry Barlow, one of the first interviews I ever did with him back in 1982, he talked about that because he lived in Wyoming. He was part of the Grateful Dead tribe, but mostly lived away from the Bay Area. But
right.
he was the first guy that mentioned to me the notion that what we have is a community with no physical location. And that was it was an important aspect of this thing. And we hear endlessly stories of people who were welcomed into that community. I just a couple of things. I just literally this week we finished and sent to the printer a book that I've been working on called Aging Gratefully.
Oh, right. I
It is
remember you talking about that.
Yeah, it's a gentleman from Wisconsin named Bill Lemke his big deadhead, and he started photographing deadheads in the parking lot of venues in the Midwest in 87, 88, and 89. And a few years ago, prompted by one of those subjects, he started photographing those people again.
Right.
He reached out to me for some advice, and I demanded to be included to do the text to go with the stories, with the photos. And I spent the last 6 months interviewing the people in those photos. And so the book is going to be pairs of images largely
Hmm.
people were photographed in the 80s and again in the 2020s. And I get to talk about them, about how they got there, how they got their picture taken the first time, and what it all meant to them, and how they got to the second photo. So the book is full of these people's stories, and a constant theme of those stories is I had no idea what I was getting into, and I walked into this thing, and they made me immediately welcome, and I thought, "This is what I've been looking for all my life." And that story has come from so many people. There's a movie, um,
Yes. Another one of
Box
these.
of Rain
Yes.
I'm suddenly I'm blanking on her
I
name.
could run out and get it because
Well,
I have a copy.
she told the story of having a serious trauma in her life, and a friend of hers said, "Well, come with me to Colorado and see the Grateful Dead. I'll buy you a ticket if you'll come with me." And she describes this experience of driving across the country, not knowing what she was going to get into, and immediately being made welcome and at home, and that just changed her life. Lonnie
Beautiful.
Fraser is the filmmaker's name. Lonnie Fraser, and the film is called A Box of Rain. Also, I just finished reading a manuscript by another woman, Liz Field, who I first met in 2017 when the 40th anniversary of the Cornell Grateful Dead show. She works
Ah,
at Cornell University, and she arranged for the Cornell Chimes to play Grateful Dead music on the 40th anniversary of the 5877 show. And we got her on Tales from the Golden Road, and we played a recording of the Chimes doing it. And so I've been friends with her ever since. And she is publishing a memoir of her life as a Deadhead. And it's a wonderful, beautifully told story, very straightforward, not florid language, no trippy, hippy dippy bullshit, just a really well told story of her life as a Deadhead. And we're in that phase of this thing, 60 years into the Grateful Dead experience, where we now get to look at what this was like to people whose entire lives were organized around this. And it's a beautiful thing. There's so much creativity, the working on Aging Gratefully, the stories I heard from people, so much creativity was inspired in others by the Grateful Dead. I mean, my own life is another example of that. But so many people became artists in some other medium because the Grateful Dead fired them up so much. And we're looking now at the result of that a half a century down the line of what this has wrought in the world and how many people have to sort of default to kindness and friendliness, because of our experiences in the Grateful Dead community. It has been, as Joseph Campbell very famously said after seeing the Dead in '87, the answer to the atom bomb.
Yeah, and he was said, this is the primal experience. I think the drums really got him, right? With it, we're having that religion, and Phil said, every time they played, it was like we're going to church. It's
They wanted it to be like that, yeah, with a
yeah,
church without dogma. I think what Campbell saw, and the funny thing is, I attended a dinner party at Weir's house with Joe Campbell
oh great,
shortly after that. It was an amazing experience to watch Jerry Garcia and Phil Lesh fanboying
geeking
Joe
out, yeah,
Campbell, right? Phil brought his copy of The Skeleton Key to Finnegan's Wake for
yes,
Campbell to
I remember
sign.
hearing that, yeah.
But what Campbell saw was this ecstatic experience of people. The thing was happening on stage, but everybody in the building was connected. He saw this group catharsis, this ecstatic explosion in that room. And it wasn't the music per se, and it wasn't the drums per se, but it was everything about the circuit completed between the audience and the musicians. And I have had that experience as a musician myself. Playing music in a vacuum isn't nearly as much fun as playing music when you're looking people in the eye and getting something back from them.
I refer to it as an amoeba.
Oh, okay.
It is all one thing, and everyone's there not just experiencing the sound of it, but the feel of it. We're all connected in there. And you feed on that as a
Yeah.
musician.
In
Yeah.
the interview you did with Jerry and Phil, David, there was a point in which they started talking about it.
Yeah.
You remember that? And
Yeah.
found myself doing that today as I was filming The Passing Show. Another thing I do here besides these interviews is to go out and put my camera outwards and just take in raw footage of who, what, when, and where, raw journalism in DC,
Mhm.
and muse about it. And I was sort of thinking about it and what it is and if we try to name it, it wouldn't work. That was what I really loved about that interview. They were talking about it, and they would refuse to name it. But when it's there on the stage, when they feel it amongst themselves and between them and the audience, it's undeniable.
Well, all of them have talked about that in
Yeah.
various ways over the years, but if Phil put it in his autobiography, Searching for the Sound, he talked about how they strove to be a single unit, a group mind. They wanted to be the fingers on a hand, exactly. They wanted to be playing as a collective mentality. And that I've come up with various phrases to describe that stuff, and it really is a thing, as they all described, of forgetting yourself and
Mm.
surrendering to it and letting it, like Phil said in another time, it's like when it's really coming through you, you're just a witness to it, and you're not even human. You're just there, and it's coming through. I've had that experience of being in the zone any number of times where you're watching it go by and it's coming through you, but it's almost beyond your conscious control. And that's when they're really, really happening all together. And everybody forgets who they are because they're subsumed into this bigger thing. It's a glorious moment, and we all get to witness it. And it wouldn't happen without us. I mean, I've had it happen in rehearsal rooms and stuff where you're really connecting, but man, it's so much easier to make it happen when there's an audience that you're doing it to, and that is giving stuff back to you.
Yeah, I had something like that experience when I fell in the Pride Parade this year with the American, what do they call it? The American Spirit or American Pride Fife and Drum and Bugle Corps. It's the first time we've done that. It's like a thing
Cool.
of a lot of us together. And when I get one of these things going, it's a fife. My individuality drops away ordinarily when I fall in with our alumni because we were very regimented, right? My music master had been the youngest drum major in the history of the Scots Guards, joined the British Army as a boy drummer, at like 15. And so he raised us as he'd been raised. But this was different because we actually interacted with our audience, the people lining the streets. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
And particularly this year of all years. Right. And it was last June. One of the things I've got here too is your improvised lives. I'm looking forward to that next book you're talking about. What was the title again of the
The
book coming
next
out?
the new book is going to be called Aging Gratefully. I think it's
Aging
called
Gratefully.
Portraits of Deadheads Then and Now. The principal author is the photographer Bill Lemke,
Bill Lemke.
Lemke. We're self-publishing.
Okay.
And it's going to come out in November. We sent it to the printer this week, and we have a book publication party in Chicago at Garcia's on November 23rd.
Great.
So I guess that's our official pub date is 2 months from now.
Is there a pre-sale available?
Yes, and of course I don't have that in my brain. I should tell that to you, but I don't have it. And
It's
they're
okay.
taking orders. I would search for the name William Lemke, Lemke.
Will do.
And
I know.
I think he's got we had a Kickstarter. We had a successful Kickstarter and took a lot of orders that way. But once that closed, he set up an online store so we can take pre-orders that way. But I don't have it in front of me.
I
Great.
might write to you and ask you to donate a copy to be raffled off for Ron Holloway, but I'd also like to pre-order and let all my Deadhead
Right. Well,
friends.
I'll be happy to send you a copy of Improvised Lives for your fundraiser. Also, just Hal can put you in touch. I,
Yeah.
I got a basement full of those, so I'm happy to send you one.
Okay, awesome. That'd be great. Thanks.
And that was so nice, David. He actually autographed it as well. So
I
that's
signed
one of the
them.
beautiful things that I have is a whole collection of your autographs on
Oh,
all kinds of
so
stuff. Oh, and I also need to work on this place. There's a little bit of an avalanche over here.
yeah,
I think Mother American Night might be in this pile. You were mentioning John Perry Barlow, and another
yeah.
thing you've worked a lot with Robert Hunter, and one of my favorite songs of yours. I have to just plug as well, if you don't mind. Do you know which one I'm thinking of?
Well, I wrote two with Hunter, so I'm guessing it's probably like a dog, or the other
No.
one is Shut Up and Listen. So,
Shut Up and Listen is the one I request all the time.
uh,
A minute or two, you might pick up a clue. I think is one of the lyrics.
yes, yeah. I Hunter volunteered that song, first song lyric to me. I was on the road and I got it in email. I would never have had the nerve to ask Hunter if he would write a song with me. So when he sent me a lyric voluntarily, my little mind was blown, as you can imagine.
I
And
can imagine.
I set it to music and I played it at a gig and he liked it and sent me another song lyric. So I have two. But the late great Steve Silberman had a very interesting observation about both of those song lyrics. He said, it's you could look at these two songs as it's like he was writing your life, but he was also writing his own life. Because Hunter, had the experience of playing gigs where audiences were too talkative and stuff like that. So there's like a literal direct referent for Shut Up and Listen, but it's also, the thing that you'd say to right-wing noisemakers and stuff like that. So that's the glory and magic of Hunter's lyrics was that they sounded good coming out of my mouth, but they would have made sense coming out of his mouth too. And that's like a great honor that Hunter had the ability and the empathy to send me a song that would mean something to me and serve his purposes as well.
It's funny you mentioned this because I hadn't realized I was going to segue into this, but there's a direct relation to Sonny. Sonny had a outfit before, right?
It still exists. I didn't mention it because it's not totally defunct, but we haven't played recently. But my very personal little project is called Sunny Triples Friends Unlimited, and the acronym for it is STFU.
Ah, very
So,
good.
but
And
still,
actually,
there are occasions that call for that project.
in fact, there was an occasion like that at the bar in the Hamilton at Ron's at the very beginning. I
What?
met this young man and he had, we had talked a little bit, and then there was another guy over at the bar who decided to get on his cell phone and talk very loudly during the first numbers. My friend that I just met there, Jamie, comes over and says something to the guy. The guy reacted really badly. Security was called in.
Oh my God.
I was sitting there thinking, I'm going to be witnessing a fight any
It was
second. I'm going to
Jamie
have to
Daly.
separate these guys.
I
Sorry?
bet I bet it was Jamie Daly because he takes no nonsense, and he's very serious about
Yeah,
listening.
he didn't know anybody there.
He's
That's
a
interesting.
performer.
This Jamie did not know anybody there. He does not know you. We talked about you.
Okay, it must be a different person.
Yeah,
But here,
it's
I
okay.
have to say something about
Yes,
that.
please.
I, as a performer,
Mhm.
would never tell people to shut up from the stage. I feel like I learned long ago that I was invited to play. I'm being paid to play, whatever, but nobody is being paid to listen. And
Good.
so if I'm not getting the attention of that room, it's on me. And I just decide to just play harder and make myself more interesting than whatever the conversation is. But I would just never, you know, yell at an audience in the middle of a show and stuff. And I don't have any kind of, status sufficient that I could get away with that anyway, but I just wouldn't do it. I figure it's my job to get their attention and keep their attention, and they're under no obligation to give me that attention unless I do something to attract it. So it's a philosophy, and also performers. We get paid to play. Sometimes they're what we call wallpaper gigs. If you're playing a farmer's market or something like that, nobody's there to hear you play. You're incidental to their main experience, and so
Truth.
to take yourself seriously enough to get upset by somebody not paying attention is, I think, inappropriate.
Right.
Well, I didn't see that happening at all
Right?
from
Sonny was going to talk.
performers. Yeah,
As
go ahead, Sonny.
as an audience member, I think that's why I was saying Jamie Daly would take no nonsense. I
Yeah.
absolutely agree. And I love some advice that someone gave me. It was someone from Dopapod years ago, and they said, take yourself seriously enough to get it done, but don't take yourself too seriously in music because you'll never be able to be the conduit, like you were saying earlier, for the thing that needs to happen. And that is, you have to have grace. So the acronym of my band is just a wink kind of thing.
I
uh,
like it.
you know but as an audience member, I know it's frustrating, and can to ask people, can you just shut up and dance, that kind of thing. Like,
Well, that's outside of my authority when I'm on stage, but I just feel like it's my job to attract people's attention and to keep their attention. I have had the experience of making an entire brew pub STFU. I'm thinking of a particular. I mean, I'm fairly confident about these things, and I very rarely get flustered over these things. But there was one particular night in a brew pub south of Denver, maybe 8, 10 years ago. And it was an incredibly noisy place. The brew pub was all one giant room with the vats and everything else. And there were metal surfaces in every direction. And everybody was talking. It was an incredibly noisy environment. But man, I sang Addicts of My Life, and I just made them shut up and listen. And I had that entire place quiet for Addicts of My Life, and my day was made. Nothing else mattered that day. I got them to STFU and listened to Addicts of My Life, and I made an entire brew pub shut the fuck up. It was a great experience.
that's great. We
Yeah,
have a
that is.
crew that does that, called Colleen and Crew, and they did it the other day. And you don't often hear dead tribute acts do that song. They stay away from it because it's not easy. And so I was really grateful to hear it, and everyone did. If there was any chatter before it, oh man.
Yeah. Well, I'm a strong singer, and I just figure that the harder I can make that happen. I can concentrate and focus and deliver a vocal performance that'll cut through. But then beyond that, it's up to them to listen.
Yeah, that's true.
And there's another amplification channel that we've been right in front of us a good bit of this show, thewell.com. I see your T-shirt, David.
Oh,
And it
yeah.
reminded me of John Perry Barlow, and he was involved in that when you started out. You were there at the beginning, weren't you?
Not quite the beginning. The well opened on April 1st of 1985, and I joined in December of 85, and we opened the Grateful Dead conference in March of 1986. The well was a very, very early online community. Back in those days, there were things like CompuServe and the Source and things like that, but it was a lot of techno geek kind of stuff and not really a thing for
Mhm.
normal humans. There was a good friend of mine. I worked for BAM magazine in those days, and BAM began publishing. It was a free music weekly, and they began publishing a magazine for computer enthusiasts called Micro Times. And this was at the beginning of the PC era, the late 70s and early 80s and stuff. And I guess I Mary Eisenhart was a good friend and a deadhead, and she was the editor of Microtimes. And one night, she and another friend, Bennett Falk, and I were at a Dead show, and she got this inspiration. She said, the Well is trying to create online communities of interest, and they're giving free accounts to people who might have, hello there, who might have something interesting to talk about. And we had talked about starting an online community for deadheads. And Mary said, why don't we try it on the well and see how it goes? And so we started the Grateful Dead conference in March of 1986, and it took off immediately because everybody wanted to talk about the Grateful Dead. As another friend of mine, the late Alan Mann, said, when you're at the show, you don't really want to talk about it because you're busy doing it. But in between shows, there's a million things to talk about. You want to trade tapes. You want to argue about the music. You want to decide what hotel you're going to stay at Red Rocks and things like that. So and there were even people who got computers so they could get online and join us. And that was kind of a glorious thing.
Yeah, it stood for
Well
the
is still there. 40 years later, we're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. And the Grateful Dead community, it's kind of quiet now because, tape trading is all gone online now. And a lot of the reasons for that community don't exist anymore, but we still have plenty to talk about. And the community, the most important thing about the well is that it is a community. I met my wife there. I know a zillion marriages that started in the well, and a zillion friendships, and a zillion other kinds of relationships. And we do everything. We trade recipes. We trade restaurant recommendations. We argue about the best version of Althea and things like that. So the well still exists, well.com. And we talk, and it's not just a Grateful Dead thing. It's for all kinds of things. One of my favorite conversation areas in there is the media conference, where we talk about how the media covers what's going on in the world and stuff like that.
Well, I think Substack is an interesting aspect of the media is transitioning, but I just noticed the
Yes,
well was started by Stuart Brand because it was the Whole Earth Electronic Link
that's
is
right.
what the L stands for. Stuart
It,
Brand and Larry Brilliant. I didn't realize Larry Brilliant until just now as I flashed it open. Maybe I'd seen it before.
Larry is an amazing guy. He had a software company that developed the
Yes,
conferencing software. But Larry, of course, is one of the founders of Seva,
exactly.
and a person who has made public health his life's mission. And Seva was founded to deliver medical services to underappreciated and underprivileged communities, and did things like go to Nepal with eye surgeons and
Yeah.
cure blindness for thousands of people. So
Millions.
Larry and Stuart, of course, Stuart was one of the original producers of the Trips Festival, which is one of the dawning events of the hippie counterculture movement in San Francisco. So both of those guys had kind of utopian ideals that they wanted to experiment with. And they started the well. The well sort of began as a way for the people in the Whole Earth software catalog to exchange information and submit their manuscripts and stuff. But it quickly became a general purpose conferencing system for all kinds of things. I started a television conference there. We have private areas where people can plan their own little campaigns and stuff on their own and share intimate, we have basically online group therapy sessions there where people can just talk about their lives in a trusted circle as well. The Well is a beautiful, quiet, text-only private community of very, very smart people taking care of each other. We raise money for people in need all the time for each other and for outside causes as well.
In fact, there have been some raising of funds for Betty, of Betty Cantor Jackson. Is that right?
Jackson, yeah. Yeah, yeah. There's somebody just did an online auction. I sent a couple of photos. In fact, I put those in the mail yesterday. I sent somebody won a print. I took a photo of Betty in the parking lot of Front Street in 1977. That's in that book you held up earlier.
Yeah.
But we auctioned off a copy of that. So I sent the picture off to the winner yesterday, and I also sent a copy of the photo to Betty herself for her own collection as well.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, people who don't know who Betty is, maybe.
Betty was one of the producers and engineers in the Grateful Dead world and one of the first females to produce a record. There's a very famous aphorism. I don't know if it actually made it onto a bumper sticker, but in the Grateful Dead world, they used to say, "Do you want to talk to the man in charge or the woman who knows what's going on?" And
One
that
of
was Betty. And in the Grateful Dead world, a lot of women didn't get as much appreciation as they deserve for all the things they did for keeping that thing going. That's one of the things we're going to talk about with Rosie tonight in the
Oh,
class,
great.
because she was a member of that tribe, and they were, everybody was living communally, not because they were, hippie utopians, but because they needed to save money so they could spend all of their time and energy making music. So I want her to talk about what it was like when they all lived communally of necessity in the early days, and how their social structures worked and stuff, but how they all took care of each other and started that community with the purest and deepest and most magical of intentions.
Yeah, her Dancing with the Dead is worth the price of admission. I also have her book of Grateful Dead photographs, the coffee table book she did recently.
Yeah.
And just like with your book, I've got my name's in there as one of the Kickstarters for it, which I loved. I loved
Yes,
being
and we
able to
both
move the
thank you for
needle a
that.
little bit. Oh, thank you. But I like to do that because it's like, when I was doing for my career up until August 2024 is not so fulfilling, but I could take what I was getting from my different government contracting jobs and move the needle for somebody else in a way that made it feel meaningful, you know? I think that a lot of us are looking for the opportunity to participate, and there are great opportunities. I go to perfectible.net, folks. David, we've run a little over the time we talked about. I don't know how you
I'm
feel
okay.
about it, but
I'm
I want to
okay.
be respectful. Maybe you could go down for another 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great.
I'm fine.
And we'll wrap it up.
I don't have another obligation. I don't have to be out of the house for another few hours. I have some writing to get done for tonight's class, but I have plenty of time, so I don't
Well,
mind. I don't need to rush off with you now.
I want to go back to that class, right?
Okay.
If somebody wants to go to that class, how would they get there?
Yeah, that's
Well,
share it in the chat as well. That's what I wanted to know.
okay. The easiest way to get there is to go to continuingstudies.stanford.edu/Grateful Dead, and that will take you to the page where you can register for the class. A few things you should know about the class: it all happens online on Zoom, and you don't have to be there in real time because the sessions are recorded. You can watch this class later. And everybody who's in the class has access to the Stanford Canvas system, where all of the sessions are stored after the fact. And there's places to interact there and talk with me and ask questions and stuff like that. And so each of these 6 sessions in 8 weeks, I have to take 2 weeks off because of travel, but we'll have one tonight and then one 2 weeks from tonight, etc. And each of the sessions starts at 5:30 California time, goes for an hour and 50 minutes. Although we open the room a little earlier and we hang out a little bit after. So there's basically a 2.5 hour window with a little bit of schmoozing before and after. But the class itself happens from 5:30 to 7:20 Pacific time. And if you can't watch it in real time, you can tune in and look at it after the fact because they stay up for the duration of the quarter. Also, in between the formal class sessions, Gary Lambert and I are going to do some guided listening sessions. This has been a very popular part of the class, the previous quarters, because we listen to music. You can't really listen to like a complete Grateful Dead set in a 2 hour class. It would eat up all the time. So we've had these outside listening sessions where we sort of get to the meat of Grateful Dead music. And Gary and I are both people who've played this music, have interacted with the band members, and of course been listening to this music for 50 plus years. So we pick out the interesting parts of music, sort of will fade in at the end of the song, and then we'll listen to the jam and how they got to the next song, and then we'll fade out once the next song starts. So we're listening to what I call the knees and elbows of Grateful Dead music, where the interesting stuff and the spontaneous things happen. So we can describe it, listen to what the bass is doing here. He's driving the bus right now, and, things like that. So they're guided listening sessions that happen in between the regular classes, just to really, really get the practical experience of music making into the minds of these people who are non-musicians.
That's
I
wonderful.
I have a
So,
question about what you do to prepare for these classes with your voice. So you talk, you do a lot of talking, you do a lot of singing. I am always up for learning more vocal exercises or sharing things that I know. What's something that's like a good,
I'm gonna piss you off right now when I tell you that I do no preparation whatsoever.
well,
I'm one of those lucky people who doesn't need to do extensive warm-ups to maintain his throat.
you have a red voice and you use your diaphragm while you speak.
Well, I
Not
took lessons for years. In the 90s, I took several years of singing lessons so I could learn how to do it right from a wonderful vocal coach out here in Berkeley named Claudine Spint, who taught all the East Bay rock and rollers how to sing. And I've been singing correctly
yeah.
these last 30 years or so.
When you do that, when you do it correctly, you don't need to do the warm-ups. You really don't. So I can hear it in your voice. I was curious, but some people do need a little help with this or that. It's always good to do some warm-ups if you don't do it frequently. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, you have your frequency, you have a very nice resonant voice, and
Oh,
you can hear that you use the dynamics and the acoustics inside, the acoustics inside. And so I love your voice.
I recommend that everybody take voice training because it just helps you in every way, not just for singing, but for talking too. I started talking into microphones 40 years ago, and then I was already singing into microphones. But learning how to do it correctly really ensured that I would be a more effective performer and also have a longer performing life because I've seen people burn themselves out and ruin their voices by not doing it right.
When you
that's
do,
right.
you actually you exercise your lungs while you're doing it, keeps you healthier, prevents pneumonia. I mean, it's so many things for your health, but it also releases endorphins
That
when you're right. It's
I remember that I had surgery last year and they brought me one of those spirometers, right? They really want you to breathe, make
and
sure that you
barometer.
and I didn't need that so much because I was already somebody who was doing that correctly. I was about to say something about it. I really do think everybody should. I was not going to sell. I just forgot what I was going to ask you. But anyway, carry on.
Oh, that you just think everybody should do vocal training. Yeah, it's really valuable for speaking, for any kind of for life. It really great.
Yeah, I had,
And
Oh,
when
oh, I know what I was going to ask. Do you? I have this sense that if I sit in my chair and sing, really, you know, not just warbling, but really sing for an hour, that must burn some calories, right?
it absolutely does. Of course it does. Yeah, because you're using a muscle, you
Yeah,
know.
and you're because I really feel like that's part of a fitness thing is that just to, even if you're sitting down, you're inflating and deflating your lungs a lot. And I sing strongly, you know, I'm pushing it out there. You can be quiet because you're singing into a microphone, but you really want to sing powerfully as well and really push it out. I feel like I am getting exercise when I'm singing for an hour.
Even when you're not singing powerfully, but you're singing with the right space and from the diaphragm, you're leveraging that muscle in the air. You're like, shoot, you know, sound is something that is moved on a cushion of air, you know.
Right.
And when you have the physics involved of taking the breath from the right space and then using the muscle to manipulate that kind of what's the thing you use for a fire? The bellows? Some people
Bellows. Yeah.
so
Talking my
that
language now.
when you can go
So
ahead,
everybody out there should take singing lessons. It's really good for you in every way.
yeah, it is. And when
And,
you lock spaces, you avoid your vocal cords and you are working out. You're working out down here, burning calories, lots of them.
Good.
and you can contract with Sunny at a reasonable rate, by the way,
I
to
I
you've got some space in your calendar, Sunny, for other students?
oh yeah. Yeah.
Do you teach online?
Yeah.
She does.
Yeah, I know I have another vocal coach out here that I sing with occasionally who teaches people online. That's one of the great things. A positive outcome of the pandemic was that everybody learned how to use Zoom. Everybody has Zoom, and we can get so much done on Zoom anymore. I've had so many meetings over these. Like the people I wrote that did this book with, I've never met them in person, but we've been collaborating for 6 months, and we have meetings on Zoom. You
That's
know,
fantastic.
it's wonderful how much we can get done remotely, how much collaborating we can do because of the technology that's available.
Yeah, David, I've never met you in person, for instance.
That's
We
right.
thought we might have an opportunity there when there was something going on with headcount, I think. You remember that?
Somebody decided they were going to fly me out at the last minute, but it turned out to be an insanely expensive plane ticket, so I didn't go.
Yeah, and, it turned out not to be open anyway, but they were so nice because of the confusion about it, and, they sent me an autographed copy of Peter Shapiro's book, The Music Never Stopped. You know that one?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was nice of them. I now have 2 copies. I've gotta find out who deserves to have the unsigned copy. Anyhow, we are wrapping up, I think. We've got 1 minute to 1 on my clock, and David, thank you so much for your generosity. I'm gonna go and see if I can find a Visa or MasterCard or something. I think I might see you this evening.
Well,
Of those.
I'd love to have you in the class. We have more than 150 students, and it's a remarkably civilized thing. We don't even have to mute everybody. People just it's been really fun. And come early because the class starts at 5:30, but we'll open the room before that because people just come in and start schmoozing and stuff. It's a real I've made a bunch of friends out of this, people that have been regular students. There are people that will have taken this is the fourth one for them of 4. So it's been really fun, and people have become friends with each other around this too. So you might make some new friends out of it.
That's wonderful, and, thank you again so much for your generosity and your time, and Sonny, thank you for joining us too. We might do this again. We might have other guests, and David, would you like to come back sometime? Fill us in?
Sure, I'm always happy to do this. Anything I can do from home is fine with me, and I'm obviously happy to talk about my favorite subject matter. Thank
Yeah,
you so much for having me, both of you.
Yeah, thank you.
it's been a
Thank you.
joy.
How do we end it, Hal?
I hit the end button, and
Okay.
then it goes away, but
All right.
And Hal, you're gonna share the way to sign up for the classes, right?
Continuing
it's fine.
studies.stanford.edu/Grateful Dead.
Okay.
Continuing studies.stanford.edu/Grateful Dead.
All
Go
right.
And
for it,
my
y'all.
and
You can
my
write it
online
in.
store is perfectible.net, and I have several books for sale there.
Yes, not
We,
just
we didn't even
improvised
mention
live.
the Jim Marshall book. We didn't even mention the Jim Marshall book that just came out last month. It's called The Grateful Dead by Jim Marshall. Photographs from the formative years 1966 to 1977. Jim Marshall was an amazing photographer, and if you don't know his name, you do know his work. He's the guy that took the famous picture of Johnny Cash going like this. That's
Yeah.
Jim.
Yep.
The Jimi Hendrix burning his guitar at Monterey, that's Jim Marshall. He shot photos that appear in the center spread of Live Dead. He shot photos that
Oh,
appear
right.
in the Woodstock album. He photographed all these jazz greats, amazing photos of John Coltrane, Miles Davis, and others. And once again, I got to do the text. I co-curated the images with Amelia Davis, and I got to interview all these musicians who worked with Jim Yorma, Jack, Michael Shreve, Dave Getz, lots and lots of musicians. So look for that book as well. That's not in that it is in my store, and I have autographed copies of that one. So yeah, all of a sudden I'm in the coffee table book business. Go figure.
Well, Jay Blakesberg too, and he's doing a lot with that. I've actually gotten in there with Jay a little bit as well. So hopefully I can get him on one of these days. The other thing
He's
that
a great talker, and he has a great slideshow. If you can get him on, he has a wonderful
yeah,
slideshow of his own life.
yeah, and that I've actually he sold out the Birchmere here in Alexandria. Have you ever played the Birchmere before, David?
Once in 1997 with the Merry Danksters.
Yeah, and you can sell out the Birchmere for basically a PowerPoint slideshow. That's
Well, go
saying
figure.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a really good raconteur, and I've really enjoyed that as well. I'm sure there was other things on my mind, but for now, I think I've imposed upon your time enough, and I will see you later.
All right. Thanks,
So
both
thanks
of
so
you.
much.
Till then,
Thanks.
that's it.
Bye bye.